Welcome, welcome everyone to the Cronin webinar series. We're going to get started here in about 5 minutes with our gold winner from 2019, the great state of Michigan. And we are going to be speaking with Mr. Will Camp, the Supplier Relations Manager for the Central Procurement Office. And we're going to be talking about circumventing risk through contract management. So I'm going to put myself on mute, and we're going to give time for everybody to get in here. And we will start here shortly. Welcome, welcome everyone. This is Lori Denhart, a Research and Innovation Project Manager here at NASPO. We're going to get started here in just a couple minutes. I just want to come on and say hi and hello to everyone and just let you know we'll get started here in just a few minutes. We'll let everybody kind of get on and get logged on, and I'll be back. Welcome everyone. My name is Lori Denhart. I am a Research and Innovation Project Manager here at NASPO. We're going to be getting started on our 2019 Cronin webinar series here in just a couple minutes. We'll give everyone another minute or two to get logged on. If you're having any technical issues, please let us know and we will do our best to assist you. Thanks so much. All right, everybody, welcome again. In case you haven't heard the other welcome messages, my name is Lori Denhart, and I'm a Research and Innovation Project Manager here at NASPO. We are going to be going through today our Cronin webinar series for our 2019 winners. Today, we have our gold winner from 2019, the great state of Michigan. Speaking for us is going to be Mr. Will Camp, the Supplier Relations Manager for the Central Procurement Office. Will leads the supplier relations teams across state government. His team handles contract management. They resolve performance issues with vendors. They support sourcing through vendor assessment risk. Prior to coming to the state of Michigan, Will was a practicing attorney focusing on union-side labor issues. His bachelor's degree is from the University of Michigan, and his law degree is from Michigan State University. Therefore, Will bleeds both blue and green, and I think that when you're talking about the state of Michigan, he's probably a rarity in that he's bleeding both of those. Just a couple housekeeping things before I turn it over to Will. Please make sure that you are utilizing the chat function in the bottom of the webinar. There is also a question and answer box for your questions. As your questions come to you throughout the presentation, please drop them in that question and answer box, and we will go over all of them together as a group at the end of the presentation. Also, once the presentation has concluded, we're going to upload the webinar to our YouTube channel within 48 hours. And two more important things. If you are needing a UPPCC contact hour from this webinar, please email me. I will drop my email into the chat function. It's ldenhart@naspo.org, and I will get that to you. If you would like a copy of the slide deck afterwards, you can email me, and I can get that to you also. As soon as the webinar does conclude today, you are going to be automatically redirected to a survey. Guys, this is a really, really fast survey. It's quick, it's easy, and this is going to help me improve our series so that way we can give you better and better webinars. So, with all of that being said, I'm going to kick it to Will Camp. Will?
Yeah.
All right, I'm turning it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Lori, and everybody at NASPO for the introduction and the opportunity. Like they said, my name is Will Camp. I'm the Supplier Relations Manager for Central Procurement here in Pure, Michigan. I'm coming to you live from Lansing. It is currently 23 degrees, cloudy with a 10-degree wind chill. So it's a really beautiful day here as it is for the next couple of months. So Lori said and mentioned that I was an attorney in private practice. I came to the state about 5 years ago. I started as a buyer, kind of rose through the ranks to become a policy analyst, and now eventually I'm the manager of the supply relations section here. So I want to first show off a little bit of our creative. We've got a great communications guy. But I first want to talk a little bit about how Michigan's procurement area is set up, because it's a little strange and it kind of helps understand better what we did. So in Michigan, we are both centralized procurement-wise, but also decentralized. So I sit in the Central Procurement Office of the Department of Technology Management and Budget, DTMB. We are the department that is delegated by the law to kind of do all the purchasing. And we let agencies do some purchasing through kind of authority that we delegate out. So we are the central office that does the big purchasing. We do the IT purchasing. We kind of statutorily hold the purchasing power and then delegate some of it out to our agencies. So we're both have a 60-person office here in Lansing, and then each agency has its own purchasing office of a couple people. So we work very closely together, but that unique arrangement makes some of what we've done really difficult because there's so many players and so many stakeholders involved. So in talking about contract management and managing risk, how we did, a big piece is the creation of my team, supplier relationship management team. Our new CPO, he's been here now, 3 years. He came from the county, from corporate, and then kind of had enough experience to say, we think supplier relations is an important aspect that the private sector really has in a lot of ways, and the public sector doesn't yet. So myself, Nick Kylan, and Joe Ernst, the three of us are the supplier relationship management team. I'm going to desperately try not to read slides because nobody wants to be read to, but we handle unhappy bidders after a solicitation closes. We handle managing contracts ongoing. We check risk factors and financial stability of companies as contracts move along. We resolve issues. We, in a lot of ways, wear many hats. And so the creation of SRM, and I apologize, I'm going to bury you in acronyms because this is state government and we all love acronyms. But the creation of SRM helps us kind of find the momentum to develop the contract management that we have today. Sidebar, if there's a supplier relations team, being set up or live in other states, I would be super interested to chat, see what you all are doing, exchange notes, that kind of thing. Because I know they're popping up out there, but I love to talk to my cohorts. So beyond that, we'll talk about the origins of the contract management we have. I think we can probably all relate to some of these. We did not really monitor our contracts unless problems happened. A lot of times it's very easy to put contracts together, put them in place, and if nothing goes wrong, they just kind of roll down the road until they need to be rebid or something happens. So we really weren't paying attention as much as we could have until there were problems. So we wanted to help fix that. We have auditors like everyone else, and they notice, so we're very conscious of that. We also weren't very good at always letting our suppliers know if they weren't performing the way we needed them to. So if somebody was, a little late now and again, nobody was probably paying attention close enough to add those up and say, you were late 22 times this year or something like that. So if you don't give notice to your underperforming suppliers, they can't do better. They need to be aware that they're not necessarily performing. So we wanted to make sure we thought about that. Roles and responsibilities, and like my third point here, are super, super important and surprisingly tricky to deal with and understand. So that was very much something we needed to think through and put together kind of a consistent way to know who's going to do what and when it comes to contract management. And then we needed to make sure that if there's supplier performance issues, they were documented consistently and meaningfully. Anyone who's had a big issue or needed to terminate a contract and has to work with their attorney general, that office, they're going to ask you, well, did you document this? And, send us everything you have. So we kind of needed to make sure that we were documenting issues in ways that we could use going forward. So that's kind of our origin story. Everybody loves an origin story, but that's kind of why we got where we are, or what set us up to do the things we did. So we set goals for ourselves, and the first and most important being customer satisfaction. We in Central Procurement are a customer service organization, and the customers are our agencies and the people of the state of Michigan. So we needed to make sure that we are giving the best customer service we could to our agencies, to the citizens of our state, because everybody loves good customer service, and it's hard to demand it from vendors when we don't do it ourselves. So there was a huge push for customer satisfaction, customer service. Second to that is, of course, we all have terms and conditions attached to our contracts and pricing. And why do we do that? Because we want the price to be what it is for the term of the contract. We want to know how much we're going to pay, and we have terms and conditions to limit risk. We have terms that say, if this goes south, you will indemnify us, or, we can cancel for cause or convenience, or these are the damages that happen. So we put all these terms and conditions in to protect ourselves. And so we need to make sure that we're following them, that vendors are following them, that we're getting the, risk reduction and the protection that we're contracting with, that we're realizing that. So that was a big piece. Another piece is we put policy into place, and we would really like it to be followed, because we get audited against that. We, have a legislature and a governor like everyone else who says, you've got policy, show us how people are following that. How do we know people are following that? So we didn't just spend, hours and hours and months, in working with our policy area to, put the Michigan Public Procurement Manual together. We didn't do that for our health, put it that way. So we want that followed. Another goal is better supplier performance. We are finding if we pay attention and are a better kind of partner to our suppliers, we get better performance out of them. And everybody wants better performance, better customer service. Absolutely, that's great. So that's another goal. Part of our customer service is being more responsive to supplier issues. So we don't want this issue to roll for months and months. The vendor gets frustrated, the end user gets frustrated, and by the time, sometimes we get involved, it is so far down the road that nobody wants anything to do with each other anymore. And, suddenly everybody wants to terminate when this very much could have been salvaged. And then the last point is, and I'm going to say roles and responsibilities a lot, is a clear understanding of what those are, knowing who's going to do what, when, just not only to make sure that people are accountable for doing what they need to do, but to know if something bad happens or if you need help with something, who do you call? Who do you reach out to for help? So that was big for us. So this nifty flow chart kind of tells you our ingredients for contract management. And I almost went I'm a big cook, baker. I almost went a real ingredients way and, a recipe, but I spared you from that. So here are the kind of, the ingredients to what we use for contract management. So roles and responsibilities are huge. I will talk about those absolutely more. Key components, understanding what we're getting out of our contracts. What are we paying for? What are our deliverables, our reports? What are those key things that we need to be monitoring and managing to make sure we're getting what we're paying for? That goes into, of course, the monitoring activity. How are we going to monitor our deliverables, our reporting? How are we going to monitor it to make sure that it's happening? Then issue resolution. The closer you watch and you look at things, the more issues you find. And that's kind of how we think of and get to contract management in the way we think about it. So let's see, have I laid enough groundwork? Just about. So our solution is the contract monitoring plan, which I'm not going to read the slide to you. I will discuss it. And as part of that, we talk about contract monitoring reports, a user guide we put together to help people understand it better, supplier relationship management, my team, handling issue resolution, and then training for central procurement and agencies alike. So this was kind of our solution. And so let me unpack this because it's really not helpful when I just have 5 points on a page for you. So the contract monitoring plan is the real meat of this system, I guess. So the contract monitoring plan is an internal document completed during solicitation development by those putting the solicitation together to summarize the bits and pieces of our contracts that we need to be looking at. So we're essentially making a cheat sheet of the contract to make it easier to monitor. So, and I'll get to that. I'll explain first that when you need to do one of these. You fill out a contract monitoring plan for, like it says up here. So we put this in place at the end of our 2017 fiscal year, or 2018 fiscal year, yeah. So our fiscal year ends September 30th. So as of October 1st, 2018, all contracts over $50,000 that are multi-year agreements, essentially beyond purchase orders, that agencies don't otherwise have authority for by statute, have to have one of these plans. So there's a lot there. I can unpack deeper if anyone has questions later. The one piece is that some agencies have statutory authority. So they have authority to purchase things on their own for specific things. Like I said here, the Michigan Department of Transportation can purchase things for road construction without coming to us. Our Department of Health and Human Services can purchase direct human services things without coming to us. But for the most part, we at DT&B and in Central Procurement kind of hold the authority to do the purchasing. So the monitoring plan is an internal document that gets filled out during solicitation development that really kind of contains all the key pieces here. And as a big part of that, I'm going to get to all the pieces of it shortly. As a big part of it was, what did I say, roles and responsibilities. So this took a shockingly, it was a really heavy lift to think through a RACI chart for monitoring performance and for contract management and for things, who is it that's doing these things? Are they sitting at the agency? Are they sitting in Central Procurement? What does that look like? And so you'll notice if you kind of give a glance to this, it's pretty vague because it's so different across agencies and across offices that we wanted it to be applicable. So you get a lot of agency identified individual, but it starts the conversation on the other end of, okay, someone over here needs to be doing this, paying attention, who's doing this, who's getting informed of all of these things happening, how do we think through this? So this chart is in our user guide. This is just a snippet of it, and I'll tell you more a little bit later. So getting into the meat of the plan is key deliverables. So this is one of the sections pulled right out of the plan. This is just an exact photo of what it would be. And we talk about key deliverables. What are we getting out of the contract? What's the point? What are we paying for? And as part of our creating of the contract monitoring plan, it's outlining these deliverables. Basically cut and paste them out of your solicitation. What's the deliverable that we're getting? There's many of them. It's probably not every single one in the contract because we're not trying to duplicate the contract. What's the deliverable? Describe it a little. How will it be monitored? Who's paying attention to when this deliverable is due or when it comes in? Key deliverables can be anything. They are road salt contracts. Our deliverables are salt. That's a really easy one. Some of our massive IT systems that I can't begin to understand have milestones and different deliverable dates and times and, again, things I don't understand. And those can be kind of your key deliverables. And we just need to know what they are kind of laid out succinctly and how do we monitor them. So this is sometimes tricky for people to think through as they're developing the solicitation because, what's the important stuff? What are we asking for? What are we paying for? And sometimes that can be kind of tricky to understand the important things, the things where the risk lies if we don't get it. So key deliverables, we sit with people a lot and talk through, what are you getting out of this contract? Oh, it's for reporting on how a fund is doing that supplies, money for this college grant program. Okay, what's your deliverable? Is it a report? Is it some sort of service that they're providing? So it can be very different for every contract. The next piece is reporting. What reports do we ask for in our contract? Now, since we put this together during solicitation development, I've sat with people before and I'm saying, okay, you know, in your solicitation, you're asking for these reports. Who's going to look at them and when do you need them? And I've had people say, I don't know. I don't know if anyone actually does look at those. So we've discovered in some areas that we've been asking for reports for years that we don't necessarily need or that we could do as needed that people aren't always looking for. So I've always said, you know, if you're asking for something, you're paying for it. So this helps us think through exactly what we're asking for and making sure that there isn't kind of a superfluous report that's not giving us any value. And it's pretty simple. What's the report? What is it about? When is it due? And how is it monitored? Who looks at it? When do they look at it? Is it somebody's looking at it, you know, every 2 weeks if it's coming in very frequently? Is it reviewed by the program manager as it comes in every month? You know, pretty simple. Just saying, we're getting this, who's looking at it? It's creating a trail, it creates an audit trail, it helps us figure out who's doing what. So that's reporting. This all kind of is pretty simple, we think, and it's pretty common sense, but it's tricky in getting it all rolling and doing it, just because it's a new way of thinking about kind of how we contract sometimes. The next big piece is service level agreements. We, especially in supplier relations management here, we really like SLAs because when something goes wrong, if you have an SLA in your contract, you can make a vendor pay right away because they've agreed to it. So, you know, SLAs, we always think of you must do this by then or else this. So you must deliver, you know, 300 tons of road salt by this date or it's 10% cheaper. You know, it's ways to lock in kind of a response to any sort of underperformance. So we're trying to use these more and more in our contracts because it's helpful with issue resolution. There's a lot of kinds of SLAs. You know, here I've just listed timeframe SLAs. Things must happen during this time, you know, or else. And then who would monitor them? Is it the end user that makes sure stuff is on time? Is it someone back in the procurement office that's tracking this, that's doing the monitoring? You know, it can depend. But like I said, SLAs can be for timeframes like here, training, maintenance, delivery, installation, all kinds of different things. There's a lot of different SLAs that we can talk about. A next piece is invoicing and payment. So what invoicing or payment requirements are there? When are we invoicing? Every time we get something, are we getting an invoice? Is it done on a monthly schedule? You know, how is that accomplished? And how are they getting paid? Is it a purchase order? You know, is it EFT, like electronic funds transfer? Is it paying with a procurement card? How are we paying? And who's monitoring that, essentially? So you'll notice in these past couple slides, we have a lot of, the stuff in green is a read and delete. So we try to, in this form, kind of explain best what needs to be done and then highlight in yellow the how. The how is this going to be monitored is the whole point of this. The monitoring plan is useless if you're just kind of relisting things out. It's more pulling out the really key elements of a contract and saying, this is how we're going to monitor these. So that's kind of the key stuff here. So those 4 bits make up essentially the contract monitoring plan. We're creating, like I said, a cheat sheet for the program manager that is monitoring this contract. That's kind of the end user that's using this contract and monitoring it. So we want to take that big contract document, some of our contracts can be hundreds of pages, and we want to distill it down into a couple pages to make it a lot easier to handle. Because here especially, program managers tend to change as people shuffle around agencies, and a lot of program managers have more than one contract. And so if someone can step into this position and have these plans, 5 of them that say, you know, here are your contracts, here's the key things, it's a lot easier to start getting a handle on the contracts with those versus reading the entire contract. It's a good place to start, and it's a good place to lay out, here's the risky stuff, here's where problems happen. If we don't get this, stuff goes south. So we think of them as cheat sheets. We think of them as very helpful during transition periods. And we've surprisingly actually had a lot of agencies say, wow, these are really, this is helpful. This helps me understand a lot better what I need to do. So we think it adds value with that. And these plans, as you've seen, the 4 pieces, the reporting, the key deliverables, they're not incredibly complicated. They don't take a ton of time to put together. There are a lot of them are very cut and paste from the solicitation in a way to, pull out the key pieces. So we don't think we're adding a tremendous burden, and our agencies have agreed that these aren't really that difficult to do, on top of the fact that SRM is very much here to help. We will sit with people and draft them for the most part, practically, or host seminars and kind of help people better understand. So we're happy to help. The one other piece that's in the contract monitoring plan but isn't fully, we just talk about it there, it's not accomplished in the plan, is contract monitoring reports, the CMR. So again, this is state government, we love acronyms, so we've got the contract monitoring plan, the CMP, and then the contract monitoring report, the CMR. So the CMR is a report of supplier performance for a certain period. So depending on risk, some contracts do these annually, some do them twice a year, some can even do them more frequently. And so as those due dates come up based on, when the contract was put in place, an email is sent out from our database directing the program managers and those that have to complete these monitoring reports to a SharePoint form where they can fill them out and kind of tell us in the past year or half year how the vendor's been doing. And they're asked simple questions, on a scale, how good has their quality been, timeliness, cost control, customer service, in like an overall ranking. How good have they been over this past time frame? And so this helps us not only know, the contract monitoring plan itself lists how we're going to monitor. The CMR gives us a snapshot for how it's going. Because if we're monitoring things, if things aren't going great, this is a way to say at every interval, we're having an issue with this, but it's getting better. And then it gives us a sense of how this is going. If a bigger issue arises, a specific thing, then we direct people to come to supplier relationship management, and we'll help them kind of deal with that as it comes. The other really kind of clever and tricky piece, and I hand it to Joe and Nick who work with me because they came up with this, was when someone fills out a contract monitoring report, they certify by clicking a box that they're following their contract monitoring plan over the past period. So it gets us our kind of audit checkbox for how did you get assurance that your contract monitors are following their plans. And so they tell us about the performance for the past period, and then they also certify they're following their plan. So it helps get the assurance that we need, and it also gives us a snapshot of supplier performance. These contract monitoring reports are all rolled up into a supplier scorecard that our buyers can see, so they get a better sense of how their vendors are doing, and then we use that information, and we can use that information going forward as we make procurement decisions in the future to know, we want to make sure past performance is considered, so we kind of learn our lessons. If there are issues, we want to make sure we do that. So that's essentially the contract monitoring plan. We have a couple other bits and pieces that help make it more and more effective, and that is the user guide. I mentioned it briefly. That's where that chart on roles and responsibilities lives. It gives some other kind of valuable information on, how are you going to monitor? Are you going to review the invoices at your desk? Do you have a conference call with the vendor at a certain interval to talk about a certain performance? What ways are you going to accomplish that monitoring? It gives some more detail regarding the contract monitoring report, that kind of periodic review. It lays out, things to think about as you're going about doing those. And then it lays out our issue resolution procedure, which was a big kind of hallmark of our contract monitoring stand-up. So issue resolution is, I think without a doubt, our favorite thing to do. We don't like that there are issues, but when things occur, we have things kind of laid out in a way that we understand how to go about them, how to step forward. So this is where we really, I guess, show our value. So we've asked agencies, all right, you now have to do contract monitoring plans. This is an extra step. We are happy to help, but in the end, and we will help as best we can. In the end, this is something that you have to do. So we've added that burden. And where we take some weight off is through issue resolution. And the kind of text on the right, not that I expect you to read it, is just a snapshot out of our user guide to show kind of how we've laid out how we deal with issues, major, minor, who's involved, who's doing what, when. So that very much helps end users get a sense of where to start and to know what's coming if they experience issues with a supplier. So we always encourage our program managers, our end users to work with vendors if they're having minor issues, to reach out, to use the relationship that they have built already, and try to resolve things with phone calls, with an email. See, a lot of the minor stuff can be taken care of that way pretty effectively. When things don't necessarily kind of shake out so well is when we get more involved, and we are, the key resource for when kind of the preliminary issues fail. So one of the big things we've gotten really good at is Nick, Joe, and myself have gotten very good at writing or ghostwriting some really scary letters. And it's amazing how much traction you can get from a scary letter, Or we have a lot of value we find just for the fact that we're a third party. So when it's just the agency and a supplier, the instant you call in, us, the fixer, that makes people we find at the supplier side pay attention and sit up and kind of lean in a little bit more, because suddenly somebody else is looking and somebody else is going to push this, and won't be ignored. So one of our greatest kind of resolutions, we had the Department of Natural Resources has a contract for bulletproof vests because apparently poachers like to shoot at conservation officers. That made complete sense when they explained it, but at first I thought, why do they need bulletproof vests? And so it had been 2 years they've been waiting on a vest for one of their officers, and it had come in, it hadn't fit, and then the resizing, and it got lost in the shuffle. And the agency was very much exasperated, like, what, why is it taking so long? What's going on? And couldn't get any traction. So finally, when we were kind of just coming into being, coming up to speed, they called us and said, can you help? We haven't been able to get anything from them in forever. And so we got involved. We wrote a really scary letter, and I think it was 6 days we had the vest in hand after 2 years. So we've been both amazed at kind of the quick strides we've been able to make, and also just the difference that us being involved makes. And so we now very much, for major issues, step in, call the meetings between the parties that involve the agency and the vendor. We sit in the middle and say, all right, here's the issues. Let's talk about the root causes of them. Let's talk about why they're continuing and how we're going to fix them. Sometimes that involves corrective action plans. Sometimes that involves just a couple meetings to get everything back on track. So we've been very pleased with how that's come to be. More and more agencies, people are learning what we're for, learning that we're valuable more and more. So we have been particularly swamped with issues recently, which is good for us. We'd rather be working on issues that come up than them sliding through the cracks. But also, we've been very busy, So I guess there's a lot of issues, but we're also working on them, so that's good. But yeah, issue resolution's been really a key and important piece. We've been taking some of the burden off of purchasers since we've kind of added it in other areas. So beyond issue resolution, so I'll talk about results. So when you look closer and you manage your contracts closer, you discover more supplier issues. And I feel like it's inevitable because the closer you look, the closer you realize, you know, they've been taking 5 days and we're supposed to get it in 4, or we've been, you know, someone hasn't paid attention enough and this timeline has slipped. And so it helps us increase accountability both on the purchasing side and on the supplier side. So it's led to better relationships with a lot of our suppliers, because when we work closer together and get everything back onto this is what the contract says, this is what we need, it's more predictable for everyone. And there are times where, you know, the state can be at fault, where we can be asking for something, you know, we need it this date here, and our contract doesn't say that. And then it becomes, you know, this is what we actually need. Our contract says this. Can we execute a change? Can we negotiate something to make sure that everybody's getting what they want? So we're not, you know, banging down the door of a supplier that's following the contract and doing what they need to, but it's not meeting our needs because we didn't properly articulate our needs. So it helps make it more predictable for everyone, which keeps people much happier. There's also, it helps with accountability for agency partners on both ends. So they keep us accountable for making sure that, you know, issues that have been reported to get taken care of and are followed up on. And in the same way, we make sure that the monitoring is getting done, that they're completing their monitoring plans when they need to, that everything's kind of flowing the way it should. So everybody's happy when everybody's accountable, kind of, yes. To make sure this is all working, we run report and follow up if plans are missing. So if contracts, we want them to be in place within 30 days of a contract execution. So we follow up and kind of say, you know, we see that you don't have this. How can we help? What can we do to help you get this done? We've, you know, Nick and Joe especially have gone and sat with people and helped them with these plans to move them along. You know, we have the bandwidth, we're happy to help. So as of now, 81% of contracts have plans in progress or completed. Now, that 19% is going to be recent contracts because this is kind of a rolling number. So every time a new contract comes into being and doesn't have a plan, it dings, you know, that percentage. So we're always trying to be better. And I think we wanted to live somewhere between 90 and 95 so that it's only the contracts that are very new within that 30 days that don't have them. But it's been a learning period. We have great support from upper management. If things aren't getting done, you know, we've had our director kind of tee up a letter to other agency directors saying, this is really important to us. You know, this is in policy. This is part of, if you're going to purchase under delegated authority that we give you, you've got to follow our policy, and this is our policy. So we're very lucky that we've had a lot of oomph behind us to help with that. So the final kind of big thing to talk through is how we did it. You know, I've shown you a lot of this is what we did, so how we did it. And it was not pleasant. This was a couple of years in the making. This was basically my child for a while, and then I pulled poor Nick and Joe into this to help as well. And we had audits that were not good, that said basically the state of Michigan does not monitor its contracts, period. That was a finding. So we had to remedy this. So we had to be very honest about what we were doing. So in the origin slide, when I talk about, you know, we weren't monitoring things unless there was a problem in that, we had to be very honest and come to those realizations like, who looks at this? And there was a lot of, I don't know, you know, who does look at this? And then it became, well, who should be looking at this? When should they look at it? How, et cetera. So a lot of honesty like that was painful, but okay. Resources are always tough. We when Central Procurement restructured a couple of years ago, we made it so that our sourcing team has kind of a support system on the other side of the house to help. So we have a customer experience area that does this supplier relation stuff, handles insurance and engagement, handles data and reporting. So we've got kind of another side of the house that helps the sourcing side kind of do what they need to do and do all this background stuff. So with SRM being created, we had resources committed to issue resolution, to resolving vendor protests, to contract monitoring to help stand this up. And without that, it was kind of hard to do and hard to get this all up and running because it's a bit of a paradigm shift for people. I mean, it seems really obvious on what monitoring a contract looks like, but in the practice, there's a lot of moving pieces. We worked with a consultant very early on who did some benchmarking with some corporate entities and some other governments and kind of gave us a report saying, we think these are best practices, here's what you guys do, and gave us some recommendations of how we could do better. And the kind of good thing about a consultant was, for once, it wasn't Central Procurement telling us what to do. You know, it gave us a little bit of kind of political cover in that way of, we asked experts and they told us this, so this is why we're moving in that direction. So that helps kind of fundamentally, so this isn't just another thing that we're pushing out saying, hey, we need you to do this. So that's always helpful. We then, the consultant offered to implement this whole scheme for, the number escapes me. I think it was like $525,000. And we kind of said, hey, we don't have that kind of money. So we said, no, we appreciate all the looking you did. You know, we appreciate your recommendations. That's great. We don't need you to implement for this. We had not contracted with them to implement it, so we just kind of didn't pick up the option. We took the findings, looked at them, and built it in-house. We developed the form. We talked with the policy, people about drafting policy in our office to make changes to incorporate that into our policy. We worked with our AGs to figure out, what does a contract monitoring plan, document look like? Does it sit in the contract? Is it just an informal document? And we came to, it doesn't sit in the contract because it places all these requirements on the state, and we want to make sure that our monitoring gets done, but we also want to make sure if somebody doesn't do some monitoring, that it doesn't have some sort of contractual problem. It doesn't create a problem. It's not the vendor then saying, well, you didn't do what you're supposed to do. So that's why it lives outside the contract. Like I said, we changed policy to align with all of this. We asked our agency partners, how can we know we need to do contract management and monitoring better. How do we work with you to make this as, as small of a burden as possible? And then in what ways can we lighten the load? How can we make your lives easier if we need you to do this extra thing? So that's always good, and it helps with buy-in as well. And then lastly, we implemented and trained users in a roadshow. So we went to different agencies, and we continue to go to agencies and talk about this as, sometimes we had the MDOT, Department of Transportation, ask us like, hey, can you come over and do a training? We've got some new buyers. So we've done that several times. We hosted a dozen in-house trainings for how to do these. So there was a couple of months where myself, Joe, and Nick were just sick of this because we taught training after training after training, but it kind of finally got the word out, and we've got people to the point that they don't call us if they have any questions or issues. Yeah. So we're in a pretty good spot at this point. So I think that's actually 3:44. All right. That's just about when I should be getting to the end. So I'm really happy to answer questions. I can send out the user guide and our contract monitoring plan template, all of that. I'll work with Lori to make those available for anyone who wants those. here's my contact information. Feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call. Emailing is sometimes better. I tend to be super responsive, and I get a lot of spam on my work phone, if I'm honest, so I don't always pick up numbers that I don't recognize. So leave me a message, drop me an email, and I'm happy to talk more with you. So Lori, if you're there.
Oh, Will, I'm always here.
Okay, good.
First of all, thank you so much, Will. That was a fantastic presentation. We've had a couple questions come in.
Good.
First of all, yes, make sure to send me a copy of your user guide and your CMP documents. It looks like I have requests coming in from the audience that they would really like to see those and be able to, look at them and utilize them as a template. And I've got a couple questions. Let's see here. My first one is coming from Maria, and she would like to talk about what is your authority to acquire agencies to utilize those CMPs, and how do you address the CMPs on statewide contracts?
Okay, yeah, good question. So our authority, so DTMB, Central Procurement, we have the vast majority of the purchasing authority for the state. So when an agency is going to purchase, we have delegated them authority to do so up to $500,000. So their authority to purchase flows through us. So as part of that, we can say, all right, we're going to delegate you this purchasing authority, but you have to follow our policies and our procedures, and you have to do our monitoring plans because it's part of our policy. So that's how we kind of tie it in, and that's how we can kind of make someone do it, if you will. The second part of the question was?
Second part of the question was, how do you address those CMPs on statewide contracts?
Oh, okay. So for statewide contracts, for a big statewide, the buyer on those is going to sit in this office with us, and they draft contract monitoring plans during the solicitation. There could be multiple monitoring plans for a contract. So as an agency's needs vary, and it's going to be a different program manager, some contracts will have more than one monitoring plan. Like if Department of Transportation is using a contract for something and they've got some kind of nuanced pieces for a statement of work, they'll have a monitoring plan for that. Every statement of work will have a separate monitoring plan. So some can have multiple agencies on a single statement of work and one monitoring plan because the central monitor is sitting here in procurement with us, and others can have, multiple plans for multiple agency use. We can talk, if, I think it was Maria, wants to shoot me an email, I could talk a lot more on that. It's complicated, so I don't want to complicate it too much.
Oh, of course. Well, let's see here. I've got another one coming in, and this is from Lucas. Lucas would like to know, is the consultant's report that informed you of the reforms is that report publicly available?
It could be. I mean, obviously everything we do is subject to FOIA. I think how we it might be of limited value, just in that we've come so far off of their recommendations. We kind of took them and ran. So I would have to circle back to it and see how helpful it is. I don't see that it's not necessarily available. We could talk further about that, but yeah, I think it probably would be. I mean, it's something we paid for. So. Okay,
so Lucas, if you're interested in that, you can reach out to Will. I was going to say, for all the other documents, Will's going to send those to me, and like I dropped in the chat box, guys, you can just email me, and I'll make sure that you get them. I have more questions, though, Will.
Sure.
See here. Paula would like to know, nope, Paula's requesting documents. I apologize. Jared would like to know, do you see a difference between supplier relations and contract management? Does your supplier relations have a pre-contract or new supplier recruitment function?
So, good question. We deal with current suppliers. Now, prospective suppliers, we have a policy and training area that does events that help to recruit suppliers, help to kind of give people more information about doing business with the state. So they have that function, but we have also in SRM worked on, Nick particularly on my team has worked on looking at contracts where maybe some big players aren't bidding, or who are the players in a certain market that we're going out to bid to get a better look at the playing field. So sometimes that's recruitment in that way to see, do we reach out to those and say, get us more information. Why don't you bid? You're a big player in this. So we're not the prospective vendor arm, but we do have touches there.
All right, let's see here. Thank you for that, Will. Let's see here. Chadwick would like to know, so when you're pertaining to your issue resolution role specifically, what would you say is the most common issue that you encounter that requires action? And is there a particular area of procurement that is frequently problematic that you have found helpful, that you found this step really, really helpful for?
So we find a lot of times it's statement of work compliance. It's how we learn a lot of times we see an agency, when you write a statement of work, what you want in your head, and sometimes it doesn't always get translated onto the page. So the most frequent thing is sometimes coming to, making sure that everybody knows that phrase, means the same thing. So we find a lot of, we're interpreting it this way, the vendor's interpreting it another way, and there is the issue. And a lot of times the vendor is interpreting it in a way that makes it a little easier on them, and I can't blame them for that. But a lot of times it's that kind of thing, making sure that our statement of works are clear and that everyone's on the same page for what needs to happen. So the monitoring plans have helped in that it makes us think through some of those things more, make sure we're saying it in the right way, and we always are happy to help and look through and read them with people. So sometimes we catch, I don't know what you're buying, so I don't know what this means, explain it to me better as a lay person, and it helps make our language clearer. The other big piece is invoicing. We have certain requirements for our invoices. We want it to list how you spent this money. You say you have a blended rate, and you said you would break it down, and then sometimes we get invoices that don't. So we catch stuff there a lot.
That's wonderful. Let's see here. Will, I've got another question coming in from Tracy. Tracy would like to know, how many employees do you work with directly, and how many employees are in Central Procurement as a whole in Michigan?
Okay, so my team is myself, Joe, and Nick. It is the three of us. Our customer experience side, our kind of customer service area of Central Procurement is 20 people maybe, and then Central Procurement as a whole is, I think, somewhere around 60, maybe 62. And I'm sure I'm going to get a text from somebody in our office listening to this with a better number. And it's literally probably going to bump it. But yeah, somewhere around there. So we have a pretty large Central Procurement office. The agencies, some agencies have a group of 10, 15. Some are much smaller, and then some are kind of spread out through the state. So we have a decent sized centralized office. But I work with, on a regular day-to-day, I probably work very closely with 15, 20 people between management here and then people on our side.
And it looks like I've got one last question coming in, and that is, on your resources issue, have you been asked to quantify performance success? Has that been, or have you been asked to quantify the estimates of cost savings or customer satisfaction surveys? Have you used them effectively in justifying the resources?
Absolutely. So that is always, good question. That is always a question. Yeah, that almost sounds like it's teed up for my management. So they
Well, it came in anonymously, so it could, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, we have been asked to quantify that, and our office uses Net Promoter Scores, and that has helped with sourcing events to better understand kind of what our customers, our agencies, how their experience is. We have the bottom of our signature lines always has a, how are we doing? Let us know, nominate someone, et cetera. And then dollar savings, we've been asked, all right, how is the contract monitoring plan or SRM? Yeah, how are you realizing dollar savings? How are you tracking that? And since we've only been around for 2.5 years, and the contract monitoring plan has only been in place, for about a year now, the monitoring plan piece we don't have hard numbers on yet, because it kind of is going to need to cycle through long enough for us to know in a contract we've paid attention better, and therefore, our costs across the board, now that all the monitoring plans are in place, aren't slipping in the same ways. We have to look at a much broader trend that we don't quite have enough information for yet, but that's coming. So I was asked at the national conference, specifically, like, do you guys have numbers yet? And I said, no, we're working on them. We have a lot of anecdotal evidence, a lot of kudos. Thank you for taking care of this. We've been working on this for years, and it's been eating up our time. Thank you for stepping in and making this happen. So we probably could quantify it in some really, brutal ways of, okay, we spent all the hours working on resolving this issue compared to, another agency. We could kind of basically say we do some of this work that an agency would have had to do, but it's tricky. That is one of our goals for this year, is to quantify and better understand the kind of value add that we are. People are really happy with us. So for what that's worth, that doesn't put dollars back in your pocket, but it's made our agencies much happier. But the next big push is also making sure we can recoup monies. If there's an issue, we should be getting money back. If something's not being delivered properly, we want to make sure we're not spending money that somebody's not owed. So in issue resolution, we've been able to claw back some money or cancel contracts or do things in a way that we might otherwise spend the money. So there is that kind of savings that we're realizing.
Very fascinating. And just to be respectful of everybody's time, Will, I have one last question, and I have some housekeeping, and we'll hop off here. My last question is coming from Lucas again, and he wants to know, do your CMP or CMR apply to federal subawards as well?
Federal subawards. That's a good question. Federal subawards. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that is. I don't believe so, because it's going to be a separate kind of subcontracted award. So I wouldn't believe so, but I'd have to get back with somebody on that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a wonderful webinar. I hope everyone has found it as useful as I did. Well, you guys did an amazing project. It is evident why you were the gold winner of 2019. We were happy, woo, to have you at annual. I'm happy to have you again on a webinar. Everybody, Will is going to send me a copy of those documents. Once again, if you would like a copy of the presentation today or any of the supplemental information that Will is going to be sending me, please shoot me an email. I dropped it in that chat box a couple of times. If you put a request for the documentation in the chat box, please also shoot me an email. As soon as I close out of this webinar, that chat box is going to go away. So I need you to shoot me that email. You also will need to email me if you would like a copy of your UPPCC contact hours certificate. My email address, I put it in the chat box a couple of times, but just one more time, is ldenhart@naspo.org. As a reminder, This webinar is going to be uploaded to YouTube within 48 hours of us closing. And also, do not forget, as soon as this webinar stops, you are going to be redirected to a survey page. It is very, very, very helpful in the development of good webinars for everyone out there that you take this survey. It helps me get the bet. It helps me to help us to help y'all. And then everybody's getting an improvement. So please, 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 please take the survey. Will, thank you again for everything that you've done today, all the prep work that you've done. I understand you work a full-time job, and then you do this as extra. And I cannot thank you enough, Will. Thank you.
Happy to do it.
All right. Oh, one more time. It looks like I have one more comment come in here into this chat box. I'm going to put my email in there one more time, guys. So that's L, D as in David, E, N as in Nancy, H-A-R-T @NASPO.org. L Denhart @NASPO.org. If for some reason you didn't jot it down quick enough or you didn't see it in the chat box, I am listed on the NASPO staff page. Thank you all so much, and thank you, Will.
Thank you.
All right.